Alright guys, I am back yet again with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days on Nintendo Switch. This time we got version 1 of my Dragon Empire Griphogila Dragontree deck. So version 1 is going to be the only version for this deck, since it's everything up through the additional special set. So through the final DLC for this game, which goes through a fraction of D-Booster Set 11. And this deck, as you can see, is the first of a whopping 5 different variants for this deck that I am going to be doing, since Griphogila himself is actually a Nationless Vanguard. You can build a version of this deck for each one of the nations, and I'm doing the main 5 nations. Technically you could do a 6th one with a Lyrical Monasterio variant, but he didn't get any dedicated support in Lyrical, and I just kinda didn't want to deal with that. So I'm just doing the main 5, and this deck is based around Griphogila's gimmick of being a grade 10 unit that you have to superior ride with your special starter, and then you fill up your field with Dragontree markers and build up to a massive final turn where you can get a guaranteed over trigger and just beat your opponent's face in. So as always, we'll be going through the deck, and then we'll show it off in one card fight. So starting first with the ride deck, this deck does have a unique ride deck to it that actually consists of 5 cards instead of the standard 4. So instead of running just the 4 units that you want to ride into, grade 0 through 3, your ride deck for Griphogila actually consists of your special starter, along with 3 Calamity normal orders, grades 1 through 3, and then your over trigger as well actually goes into your ride deck. So first of all, for the grade 0 starter, we have Griphoseed. So he has a continuous ability that says this unit gets power plus 2,000 for each Calamity card with a different card name in your soul. And then it also has its auto ability that says at the beginning of your main phase, you choose a Calamity card from your ride deck and put it into Soul. Then you can pay the cost of putting 3 Calamity cards from Soul that were in the ride deck back into the ride deck face up to search your hand or deck for up to 1 Dragontree of Ecliptic Decimation Griphogila. Ride it as stand, and if you searched your deck, shuffle your deck, and if you wrote a card, you choose 2 of your rearguard circles and put a Dragontree marker on each of them. So the way this deck functions is, instead of just riding normally during your ride phase, instead you don't ride, and when your main phase starts, you get to take a Calamity order from your ride deck and put it into your soul, which will increase Griphoseed's power by 2,000, so your power will be scaling the same as it normally would if you were riding like you normally would. And then on turn 3, once you get your 3 Calamities out of your ride deck into the soul, you can send all 3 of those Calamities back to the ride deck face up in order to superior ride into Griphogila from your hand or main deck, preferably from the main deck, since that way you don't use up any cards from your hand. So that is the only way to initially ride into Griphogila, since he is a grade 10 card, and obviously there are no grades 5 through 9. So this is the only way to get him into play. So once you do that, you'll have your actual Vanguard in play on turn 3, just like you normally would. And you also get to put 2 Dragontree markers onto 2 of your rearguard circles. Which, the Dragontree markers, I'll throw up a screenshot of them. They just have an effect that says during your turn, if you have a Vanguard with Dragontree or Masks in its card name, all of the units on this circle get power plus 5,000. So just a simple power-up skill, giving an extra 5k to any units you get onto that circle. So you want to get as many of those onto your board as possible and power up all your rearguards by 5k. So definitely a unique gimmick for this deck, which has both its positives and negatives. One of the positives is that since you're not actually riding every turn, that means you don't have to discard. So this card is technically a +1 every turn to your hand up until turn 3. So that can help build up your hand really big early on. However, on the other hand, since you're stuck on grade 0 until turn 3, That means your first 2 turns are going to be pretty vanilla, since you won't be able to call any rearguards early and rush or do anything like that. I mean, technically you could call, you know, some triggers or something from your hand, but obviously you don't want to do that. So your first 2 turns are going to be pretty vanilla, but this deck is definitely a stall deck since you have to drag the game out for a long time in order to do your big play anyway. So yeah, definitely a unique starter for this deck. So next, for the 3 Calamity cards in the Ride deck, we do have 1 of each grade. So the grade 1 Calamity is Beginning of the End. So you can play it with a Counterblast 1, and it lets you search your deck for up to 1 Calamity card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle your deck. Which, honestly, is a pretty shitty skill. But thankfully you won't ever actually be playing this card, because it's never going to be in your hand. You just move it back and forth between your Ride deck and your Soul in order to use Grifoseed's and Griphogila's abilities. So this is just kind of a placeholder skill that isn't actually used for anything. You don't have any copies of this in the main deck for any reason. So yeah, it's pretty much just a piece to be moved and not actually used. So then the grade 2 Calamity is Ill-Omened Transmogrification, which has the same skill. All 3 of the Calamities have the same skill. And again, it's never used. And then the grade 3 Calamity is Coming of Demise. And again, it has the skill that is never used. So then the last card in the Ride deck is our Overtrigger, which is Dragon Deity King of Resurgence, Dragveda. So his additional effect lets you choose one of your Vanguards and stand it. So since the Overtrigger is in our Ride deck and not our main deck, we don't have a chance of randomly drawing into it at any point. That also means our overall chances of getting a trigger is a little lower, since this still counts towards the 16 triggers in the deck. So you're only going to have 15 regular triggers floating around in your actual main deck to check into, and then you can be guaranteed to go into this one very late in the game with Griphogila's skill. So that is the Ride deck. Moving on to the main deck, first off, we have the grade 10s, which is our main Vanguard for the deck 4 copies of Dragontree of Ecliptic Decimation, Griphogila. So first off, he has a continuous ability that says during your turn, this unit gets power plus 5,000 for each Dragontree marker on your rearguard circles. And if you have 3 or more Dragontree markers, this unit gets critical plus 1. So Grifoseed will give you 2 of the 3 markers that you need for this ability. So that'll put him at least a 23k base at all times. And if you can get at least 1 more Dragontree marker out through your other card's abilities, then that will give him the extra critical, plus 5k more power. So with 3 markers, he'll be at 28k to crit on his own, potentially up to 38k to crit if you can fill up your entire board with Dragontree markers. Technically, possibly even more with the Blitz order. But yeah, he should be hitting some very massive numbers on his own with that extra crit pressure. So he should do a pretty good job of wearing down your opponent's defenses, which will also help set up for his auto ability that says once per turn, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, you choose a face-up Calamity card from your Ride deck and remove it. And if you did not remove a card, you choose a Overtrigger from your Ride deck, reveal it, activate all of its trigger effects and additional effects, remove it, and stand all of your rearguards on rearguard circles with a Dragontree marker. So the way this works is when you attack with him on turn 3, you remove one of your Calamities from your Ride deck, and then you do the same thing again on turns 4 and 5. And then on turn 6, when you attack with him, you won't have any Calamities left in your Ride deck, so instead you get to activate your Overtrigger directly from the Ride deck instead, and you get all of its trigger effects and additional effects. So that means when you activate it, you will get to draw a card, you'll get to give one of your units 100 million power, and you'll get to restand your Vanguard with Dragveda's ability, along with restanding all of the rearguards that you have on Dragontree markers as well. So that should give you a guaranteed 6 attacks on turn 6, potentially 7 if they have a certain rearguard out. Plus, you'll get the 100 million power, which, depending on what you got out, will determine who you give that to. But either way, it should be at least 2 of those attacks having 100 million power. And you'll be getting the 4 drive checks from Griphogila's 2 attacks as well. So, if you can survive that long, it's definitely an absolutely devastating turn. You should be winning on that turn if you make it that far. Of course, the problem is making it that far, since this is a turn 6 play. So that means this deck is massively slow, and you're going to have to be very smart about how you control the pace of the game in order to make it that long. But if things do go to turn 6, then you should be pretty much guaranteed to win on that turn by that point, with that much offense coming your opponent's way. Or alternatively, you can possibly just finish your opponent off before then, with your Vanguard swinging for such massive numbers. And this deck can do potentially 4 attacks with some consistency every turn. So if you can get that off, you might be able to wear down your opponent and actually take them out just through standard gameplay before you get to your big push turn. But yeah, the overall idea is to survive until turn 6 and then just unleash hell with your overtrigger. So, a pretty neat gimmick for the deck. Like I said, it is massively slow, so that can cause some problems sometimes. But when you do make it that far and you get to do that big play, it is very satisfying to unleash that massive amount of offense on your opponent. So that is the only grade 10 in the deck. I will point out that I am running 1 copy of just the standard triple rare Griphogila, and then 3 copies of the double frame rare. I usually superior ride into the triple rare copy on turn 3, and then persona ride into the frame rare copies, just cause I can. But anyway, that is all the grade 10s, so next moving on to the grade 4s, because we are running 1 grade 4 in this deck. We have 3 copies of Virina Esperidia. So this is a grade 4 unit, but since your Vanguard is going to be grade 10, you can just normal call him from your hand like you would anybody else once you ride into Griphogila. And you can overdress him onto Trickstar, but actually you can't, because we're not running Trickstar in this deck. So you will have to just normal call him. You can't overdress him, which means his first auto ability is not usable in this deck. But we are using him for his second auto ability. That says once per turn, when your Vanguard attacks, you can Soul Blast 1 to stay in this unit, and this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn for each of this unit's original dress. So he won't be gaining any power from this, obviously, since he won't be overdressed, but he will be able to restand himself whenever your Vanguard attacks with the cost of a Soul Blast. Now, one thing to point out here is that since you aren't riding like you normally would, and all the calamities get removed from your soul when you go into Griphogila, that means on turn 3 you're actually only going to have 1 card left in your soul, which is Griffo Seed. So being able to constantly fuel this ability every turn can be a little troublesome. We have a few cards in this deck that can help with soul, but they're not the most reliable things in the world. So you might not always be able to pay the cost for this, especially if you miss your persona rides. So you might want to use this a little more sparingly. But if you can keep your soul up, this card can be a 4th attack for you every turn, which, like I said, he won't be gaining any power from his own ability, but he should be sitting on a Dragontree marker, so that'll put him at least 18k right there. So you got a decent attacker out of that. You get your 4th attack every turn, and if you make it to your big push turn on turn 6, when you go into your overtrigger, he actually can allow for 7 attacks that turn, since you can attack with your 2 rearguard columns, and then attack with Griphogila, and when you activate Drag Veda, that'll let you restand all your rearguards and your Vanguard. So then you can attack with your rearguards again, and then when you attack with Griphogila the second time, you can use his skill to restand himself. So that'll give you your 7 attacks in total. So this card is one of the main attackers of the deck. You could up it to 4 copies if you want to. I'm keeping it at 3 because I use it a little more sparingly. If you could have some ways to fill your soul more efficiently, then I would use it more than that. Technically, if you had 2 of them in your front row and you could pay the cost, it could give you a 5th attack every turn, and then a 8th attack on your big over-trigger turn. But again, being able to fuel that soul enough to do all that usually isn't feasible. So I'm more conservative about using him, and I'm just keeping him at 3 copies for now. But if you want to up him to 4, you could take out something else and do that. So that is the only grade 4 in the deck. Moving on to the grade 3s, we just have 1 copy of Thirst Ray Dragon. So he has a continuous ability that says during your turn, if this unit is on a rearguard circle with a Dragontree marker, this unit gets power plus 10,000. So between the marker's power up and then his own skill, he will be a 28k beat stick on your board. So yeah, he's just there to be a beat stick unit. This is the card that you'll most likely take out and replace with a 4th Iridia if you want to go that route. But I did decide to just pop him in at a 1-of instead, since for one thing I really like his art, and for another thing, just having that free big powerhouse on your board to attack with every turn can be nice as well. So that's all the grade 3s in the deck too. So moving on to the grade 2s, first off we have 4 copies of Meteor Flare Dragon. So he has his auto ability that says when this unit's placed on rearguard circle until end of turn, all of your opponent's rearguards lose all of their continuous abilities and cannot gain them. Then you can counterblast 1 to choose one of your opponent's rearguards in the same column as this unit and retire it. So this is just the control option for the deck. It is your main phase retire, which we actually need for some of our other card skills. He also removes all your opponent's continuous abilities, so that lets you get around any of those, this card can't be chosen sort of abilities. So he can make those units vulnerable to being retired as well. And then he's also got his continuous ability that says during your turn, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater and they have no rearguards, this unit gets power plus 10,000. So he can be a 20k beat stick, 25 since he should be on a Dragontree marker. Now, you're not going to get this ability a ton. Your opponent has to have a completely empty board in order for you to get this. And this deck is just not built to clear entire boards. So if your opponent plays a lot of rearguards, you're probably not going to be able to get this skill. The only time it's going to go off is when they either have no board or very little board. And you can use his skill and then maybe one more skill to clear it. So you can occasionally get that power up, but most of the time you're not going to. But when you do get it, it does make him a nice beat stick as well. So next we got 3 copies of Twin Bullet of Duststorm, Travis. So he has an activate ability that says once per turn, if your opponent's rearguard was retired this turn, you can counterblast 1 to soul charge 1 and choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. And this unit gets power plus 10,000 until end of turn. So the only way for this ability to be live is if you called Meteor Flare that turn, since you had to get a retire during the main phase in order to use this. So without Meteor Flare, this card is vanilla, unfortunately. But if you call Meteor Flare and then use his skill right after, it will let you soul charge, so that can help build fuel for Iridia's skill later. It also lets you pick off another one of your opponent's rearguards, so that's a -1 to them. And Travis himself gains 10k too, which again should turn him into a 25k attacker for that turn with the Dragontree marker. So a bit more of a piece-reliant combo, since you do have to have Meteor Flare to take advantage of him, but he still can be a pretty useful card for the deck. So that's all the grade 2s, moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 4 copies of Dragontree Wretch, Dracobatical. So this is the dedicated Dragontree support for this deck, and he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you can counterblast 1 to choose one of your rearguard circles without any Dragontree markers, and put a Dragontree marker. So this is the primary way to generate your extra Dragontree markers outside of Grifoseed's skill. So it does cost a counterblast, but it will give you your 3rd marker onto the board. So that will turn on Griphogila's crit gaining ability, and give him more power as well. And then he has a second auto ability that says once per turn, when your opponent's rearguard is retired during your main phase, you can Soul Blast one to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to one grade 1 or less unit card from among them, call it to rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So this ability I actually don't use very much. Again, it has to be triggered by a retire during the main phase, so the only way to do that in this deck is Meteor Flare. So again, the skill can't be used without him. And even if you do get it, it costs a soul, so it conflicts with Esper Iridia's cost, and you pretty much always want to save that soul for him instead. And even if you use this ability, you check the top 5 for a grade 1 or less to Superior Call. So this ability could easily whiff after you pay that cost, and if it does, then you ended up just wasting a soul that could have been used to get another attack with Esper Iridia. So the Soul Blast cost kind of kills this ability in this deck. Again, if we had a more efficient way to Soul Charge, it would be a bit more useful. But I end up not using this ability most of the time. If I'm really desperate for a board and want to dig for a grade 1, then you can go that route. But yeah, most of the time I am just using him for his first ability to generate those extra markers. So next up, we got 3 copies of Twin Strike of Duststorm, Orlando. So he has an activate ability when he's in your soul that says if your opponent's rearguard was retired this turn, you can counterblast one and call this card to rearguard circle. So this is another ability that doesn't really get used much. You don't really want to call him from your soul. You want to keep him in your soul to be fuel for your other skills. And you get him into your soul usually with his auto ability that says when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard attacks, you can put this unit into your soul to choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So this is the other way to fuel the soul in this deck besides Travis. You can boost with him and then just shove him into your soul when Griphogila attacks, and you can power up Griphogila even further by an extra 5k, and you get that soul resource out of it. Now this is a -1 since you're losing him off of your board, and you definitely want to minus as little as possible in this deck since you usually have to survive a long time to get your big play. So again, you might want to be careful about when you use this ability. But if you're really desperate for that soul, it is pretty much the best way to get it in this deck. So next we have 2 copies of Stealth Dragon Fushimachi Madoka. So he has a continuous ability that's active on rearguard or guardian circle that says if your opponent's drop has 4 or more cards, this unit gets power plus 2,000, shield plus 5,000. Then if it has 8 or more cards, this unit gets an additional shield plus 5,000. So if you call this to rearguard, it can be a 10k body on your board, but most of the time I don't call him, unless maybe on turn 6 just to fill up my board. But most of the time I want to keep him in my hand to potentially be up to a 15k shield, since like I said, you do want as much defense as you can possibly get in this deck to survive until your big over-trigger turn. So yeah, just having some more potential 15k shields is the main purpose of this card. So the only other grade 1 we have is 4 copies of our Sentinel Sparkle Rejector Dragon. So this is just the standard Perfect Guard, and we are just running 4 of it since we can't use Sanctitude in this deck since our Vanguard's going to be grade 10. So that is all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s. First off, we do have our trigger lineup, which we only have 15 triggers in the main deck, like I said. So I am just running rainbow triggers, so we have 4 crit, 3 front, 4 draw, and 4 heal. So starting first with the crit triggers, we have 4 copies of Burning Flail Dragon. So at the end of the battle it boosted, you can put it in your soul, choose one of your units, and it gets power plus 2,000 until end of turn. So another way to fuel soul for this deck, if you want to. Again, that's losing a 15k shield, so you kind of use that sparingly. Next for the fronts, we have 3 copies of Blaze Maiden Parama. So front with a skill, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, shield plus 5,000. So your 20k shield front trigger. Next for the draws, we have 4 copies of Flare Veil Dragon. So same skill, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, shield plus 5,000. So your 10k shield draw trigger. And then lastly for the heals, we have 4 copies of White Light Dragon Parasolus. So just the vanilla heal. Of course, if you want to play any of the effect heals, you can. And then our last grade 0 is 2 copies of the Calamity Blitz Order Corrosive Smoke Signals. So there's no cost to play this, and you can play it if you have a Hydrogrom Vanguard, which Hydrogrom is the race of the Dragontree cards. And it lets you choose one of your rearguard circles without any Dragontree markers, put a Dragontree marker, then choose one of your units being attacked, and it gets power plus 10,000 until end of that battle. And if you have a Vanguard with Griphogila in its card name, it gets power plus 20,000 instead of plus 10,000. So this card is a grade 0, so that means you can play it before going into Griphogila. And Grifoseed is also a Hydrogrom, so it will still have the correct race to play this card. And it can just be a 10k shield early game, or a 20k shield after you ride into Griphogila. So a good defensive card either way. And it also generates another Dragontree marker for you, so that can get another one onto your board for free. Now, one thing to note with this card is, since all of the abilities in this deck that generate Dragontree markers, except for Grifoseeds, require you to put them on a rearguard circle that doesn't already have a Dragontree marker. If you play this while you're still on Grifoseed, when you ride into Griphogila and use his skill to get your 2 markers, you can put one of those 2 markers on the circle that you already put a marker on with this card. So that is actually the one and only way to stack more than one Dragontree marker on the same circle with this deck. And if you do that, then both those power gains will stack. So any units on that circle will gain an extra 10k. So if you play this early, that is a way to stack your Dragontree markers. So that can power up one of your rearguards by more, and also that can allow your Griphogila to potentially reach higher as well, since he just counts the number of markers, not the number of rearguard circles with markers. So that can be a cool play to keep in mind if you draw into this card early. So that is the deck. So we will go ahead and have our one fight with it. And I think I'm actually going to fight Kai this time. And we will be going first. Alright, so we want to end the phase without riding, and instead use Grifoseed's skill to add one of our calamities to our soul. So it doesn't matter what order you do them in, but I always just do them in grade order. So we'll put beginning of the end into our soul, which will give Grifoseed an extra 2k power. And then we just end our turn. And I'm going to go ahead and guard this one, actually. And he gets a draw trigger, but that's still not enough to hit. So again, we don't want to ride, and we use Grifoseed's skill to put Ill-Omened Transmogrification into the soul to bring him up to 10k, and we can't do anything else, so we're just going to attack.
Damage check. Stand and draw. Light. Skill発動.
So search out Gojo from his deck and get it into his hand.
Vanguard にアタック
And he's gonna go ahead and rush us. So I'm gonna let this one through.
ノーガードいいねいいねダメージチェックヴァンガードにアタック
And I think I'll let that one through too.
ノーガードチェックザドライブトリガーゲットドロートリガー
He gets another draw trigger.
いいねいいねダメージチェックスキル発動だ
And Gojo's skill will let him retire himself and countercharge. So we'll guard that one with that heal.
ガードターンエンド俺のターンドロー
Alright, so once again, we do not ride. Instead, we use Grifoseed skill to automatically put Coming of Demise into our soul. Then we can send all three from the soul back to the ride deck to Superior Ride into Griphogila from our deck. So then we get to place 2 Dragontree markers, and we want to put them on our front row rearguard circles. So that gives Griphogila an extra 10 key. So then I am going to go ahead and call Meteor Flare Dragon. And we'll use his skill to counterblast one. And we can retire Burning Horn. And then we'll plop down Esperaridia as well over here. And I think we are good. So we will attack with Griphogila first. And we're going to use his ability to remove one of these Calamity Orders from our ride deck. And we don't want to use Esperaridia because he's already standing. Which Griphogila has a really cool on-hit animation. So then we will attack with Esperaridia, and I'm going to take out his rearguard Nahalem here. And then we'll attack with Meteor Flare. And he guards.
My turn. Draw. Ride the Vanguard. Skill 発動だ。スペリオルコイル。スキル発動。パワープラス。パワープラス。コイル。スキル発動。
He's still got 2 Nahalems in his front row to power up his units. So we can't normal call units from our hand to guard with, but we can play our Blitz order. And if this attack doesn't hit, he won't be able to restand his Vanguard. So I'm going to play Corrosive Smoke Signals. So we'll get another Dragontree marker, and we will put it over here. And that's 1 to pass, so I'm going to intercept with Meteor Flare as well.
Intercept. Check the drive trigger. Get critical trigger.
He got a crit trigger, but he gave it to a rear guard.
Check the drive trigger.
So that attack did not hit. So Overlord will not be able to restand himself. So I am going to let that one through. And I'll guard that one with that crit. Alright, so now we will Persona Ride. And since we have our third Dragontree marker, thanks to our Blitz order, Griphogila does have 2 crit now. So once again, I will call Meteor Flare Dragon and use his skill. And we will Counterblast and take out that Nehalem. And then I think I'll go ahead and attack. And we're going to attack with Esperaridia first this time. And I'm actually going to have him attack into Nehalem. And since he's got no rear guards, Meteor Flare gains an extra 10k. And then we can attack with Griphogila. And we'll use Griphogila's skill. And we will remove our second Calamity from the ride deck. And then Esperaridia's skill will let us Soul Blast one. And restand. And he let this one through. So that's going to put him to 4. So then we can attack with Esperaridia next. Well, that's that one through 2. So then we'll attack with Meteor Flare. Perfect guards. So we got him to 5 already. He must not have much in his hand to guard with. But he does ride into the end. And he could not fill up his front row. So let's see, I am going to let this one through. He gets a heal trigger, which he does get. And a draw trigger on top of that. So now the end will restand. And I am going to perfect guard this one. And we'll discard Travis. Gets a crit trigger. And that is massive, so I think I'm gonna have to perfect guard that one too. And we'll have to discard that heal, I guess. Alright, so I could Persona Ride here, but I actually want to save that for my over trigger turn. So I'm actually not going to ride. And instead I'm going to call Dracobatical over here. And we'll use his skill to Counterblast. And we'll get one more Dragontree marker. So that gives Griphogila another 5k. And then I'll just go ahead and attack with Griphogila first. And we'll use his ability to remove our last Calamity Order. And we're not gonna restand Esperidia this turn. Any perfect guards. And we get a draw trigger, so we'll give that to Esperidia. And we drew another perfect guard, which we might need. So then I'm going to have Esperidia attack his rearguard overlord. Which will power up Meteor Flare by another 10k. And we'll have him attack, boosted by Dracobatical. And unless that went through. And that crit is wasted. So we got him to 5, and our next turn we can do our over trigger. So if we can survive this turn, we'll be good to go. But he does Persona Ride. But he doesn't have any rear guards besides his booster, so we can perfect guard this one. And discard that draw. And he gets a heal trigger, which he does get. So now the end re-stands, but thankfully we have another perfect guard, so we'll go ahead and use it. And discard this other draw trigger. So we are all set up to do our big final turn, so we might as well declare final turn. And then we can Persona Ride. So I'll go ahead and call Madoka behind Esperidia. And he'll gain 2k thanks to his own ability, and then 5k from the Dragontree marker. So now we will attack with Esperidia first. 43,000. Unless that went through. And then we'll attack with Meteor Flare. Any guards. So then we can attack with Griphogila for 43,002 crit. And we're going to use Griphogila's ability. And we will activate our over trigger. So we get to draw, and we can give 100 million power to one of our units. So I'm going to give that to Esperidia. And then our Vanguard restands, and all our rear guards on Dragontree markers restand. And we're not going to use Esperidia's skill right now. And he has to let this one through. So we should have him right here. Oh, but he got his over trigger. Miracle over. But that was 2 crits, so he needs a heal too. And he didn't get one. So we still got him. Even through a miracle over trigger. Which we had 200 million plus attacks coming his way even with that. So we still would have had a chance. But there you go. That was my Dragon Empire Griphogila deck. Which can be pretty cool, despite being extremely slow. So I will be back soon with more deck profiles. Next up I will be doing the Kidder Sanctuary variant of Griphogila. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.